Nobody saw it coming. Not the fans, not the blogs, not even the people who usually claim they can read every shift in the entertainment world before it happens. And yet, within a matter of hours, a wave of claims, rumors, and leaked chatter began circulating online that shook social media to its core. According to unverified reports spreading rapidly across platforms, something significant allegedly unfolded involving Tiny Harris and a courtroom decision that immediately set the internet on fire. Some posts described it as a sentencing, others called it a final judgment, and a few even went as far as saying it marked the end of an era for one of hip-hop's most talked-about power couples. But here's the problem. Nothing about this story is clear, and that uncertainty is exactly why it's spreading so fast. What is known, at least from the swirl of online claims, is that a courtroom moment allegedly took place behind closed doors, away from cameras and public attention. And what followed, according to those same unverified accounts, wasn't the kind of calm legal conclusion people expect. It was described instead as tense, emotional, and deeply unsettling. Witnesses were never officially confirmed, but anonymous posts claimed the atmosphere inside was heavy enough to silence even those accustomed to high-pressure legal environments. The judge's words, whatever they may have been, were described as having an immediate emotional impact. Some online users claimed there were tears. Others mentioned raised voices. A few even suggested moments of panic as the situation unfolded. But again, none of this has been officially verified. What makes the story even more intense is the idea that this didn't come out of nowhere. Long before this alleged courtroom moment, whispers had already been circulating through entertainment gossip circles. At first, they were vague, talk of behind-the-scenes pressure, private legal concerns, and sealed matters that would eventually surface. Most people ignored it. After all, celebrity rumors are constant, and most of them disappear within days. But this one didn't disappear. Instead, it evolved. Over time, online discussions began to shift. Old interviews were resurfaced and reanalyzed. Past reality TV moments were dissected frame by frame. Fans started noticing what they called unusual energy shifts in public appearances, moments where smiles felt forced, or where conversations seemed slightly guarded. Still, nothing concrete ever emerged, just patterns, speculation, and interpretation. Then came the sudden escalation. A wave of online posts began claiming that something serious had reached a legal stage. Terms like investigation, documentation, and court involvement started appearing in discussions. None of these claims were backed by official sources, but that didn't stop them from spreading. In fact, the lack of clarity only fueled more curiosity. People began asking the same question over and over again. If nothing is happening, why does it feel like something is? As the narrative built momentum online, attention shifted toward T.I. as well. According to speculation, his reaction to the alleged situation became a focal point of discussion. Some users described him as protective, standing firmly beside Tiny in every rumored scenario. Others interpreted his silence, or lack of public clarification, as something more strategic, suggesting that there might be details he simply cannot address publicly. But again, these are interpretations, not confirmed facts. What truly intensified the conversation was the idea that multiple sources began contradicting each other. One version of the story claimed everything was resolved quietly. Another insisted it was ongoing. A third suggested that the entire situation was being exaggerated and misunderstood from the start. Three narratives, no confirmation, maximum confusion. And that is exactly the environment where internet speculation thrives. As days passed, the claims escalated further. Some posts alleged the existence of leaked documents. Others referenced supposed audio clips and timelines being shared in private circles. None of these materials were ever verified, but their mere mention was enough to send online discussions into overdrive. Suddenly, people weren't just reacting to a story, they were trying to solve one. Every old clip became a clue. Every past interview became evidence in the eyes of social media detectives. Every pause, every facial expression, every edited scene from years ago was reinterpreted under a completely new lens. And with that, the narrative began to spiral further away from anything grounded in fact. At the height of the discussion, the phrase "goodbye forever" started trending in connection with the rumor. No one could confirm where it originated. Some said it came from a leaked post. Others believed it was simply internet exaggeration that took on a life of its own. But once it entered the conversation, it became symbolic, representing the idea that something irreversible had supposedly taken place. That's when things reached a breaking point online. Supporters of Tiny and T.I. pushed back strongly, arguing that the entire situation was being distorted and blown out of proportion. They pointed out that no official statements had been released, no verified legal records had surfaced, and no credible news outlets had confirmed any of the claims. On the other side, skeptics argued that the consistency of the rumors, despite lacking proof, was itself suspicious. They believed too many coincidences were aligning for there to be nothing at all behind it. And in the middle of all this chaos stood the couple themselves, silent publicly, at least in terms of addressing the circulating narrative directly. That silence became its own source of speculation. Some interpreted it as restraint, a deliberate decision to avoid feeding baseless rumors. Others saw it as something more complicated, suggesting that legal sensitivity or private matters might be involved. But without confirmation, every interpretation remained just that, an interpretation. As the story continued to evolve, even more layers were added. Anonymous insiders began appearing in comment sections, each claiming to have a different piece of the puzzle. One said the situation had been misunderstood from the beginning. Another claimed it involved multiple unrelated issues being merged into one narrative. Another insisted there was more coming soon. But none provided proof. And yet the engagement kept growing. Because at this point, the story was no longer just about what happened or didn't happen. It had become about uncertainty itself, about how quickly information can spread without confirmation, about how narratives form in real time based on fragments, emotion, and speculation. And most importantly, about how easily perception can shift when silence fills the gaps. Today, the situation remains unclear. No verified legal confirmation supports the claims circulating online. No official records have been publicly confirmed, and no direct statements have clarified the rumors that sparked the entire wave of attention. What remains instead is a divided internet, multiple competing narratives, and a story that continues to mutate with every new post, clip, or comment. Some believe something serious is being hidden. Others believe nothing serious exists at all. And until something concrete emerges, the truth sits somewhere in between, unconfirmed, unresolved, and still being written in real time by the internet itself. Tiny was reportedly shaken in the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, heavy, suffocating, as if every person in the room felt the weight of the moment pressing down. What was expected to be a single allegation spiraled into something much larger. A second layer emerged, suggesting a pattern, a deeper and more troubling sequence of events hidden for years. Even the most vocal defenders went silent. The focus shifted. The conversation was no longer about a single misstep or isolated incident. It became, how long has this been going on? Who else knew? And who might be implicated? What followed changed the narrative entirely. Within 48 hours of the initial proceedings, a wave of leaks crashed across social media. This time, the information was structured, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Carefully compiled threads laid out video clips, timelines, and evidence with chilling precision. At the center of these leaks was an insider even closer than the first, a person claiming direct knowledge of critical moments under scrutiny. Their revelations included precise locations, dates, names, and sequences of events, directly contradicting the official story Tiny and T.I. had maintained. The contradictions were stark, undeniable, and explosive. Social media didn't just react, it detonated. Hashtags like Tiny Verdict, T.I. Family Secrets, and Justice or Setup trended relentlessly, flooding timelines with accusations, analysis, and calls for accountability. Comments poured in. This timeline matches Whispers from 2019. Her reaction in that old clip makes total sense now. I defended them for years, and now I feel completely misled. Even celebrities began posting cryptic messages, hinting at revelations that were long overdue. Fans split sharply. One side insisted Tiny was being set up, a victim of targeted attacks. They've always been hated on. This is just another smear campaign, supporters argued. The other side, however, cited the precision and consistency of the leaks. Too many sources, too many details. Something serious is going on here, they countered. Authorities reportedly stepped up their involvement. The legal process became public, and the pace of events accelerated dramatically. Tiny was drawn into formal proceedings filled with witness testimonies, legal arguments, and evidence that insiders claim was far more intense and revealing than anyone imagined. Inside the courtroom, sources describe a palpable shift in energy, a moment when it became clear that the outcome would be significant, not just for Tiny, but potentially for the larger network of people around her. Allegations expanded beyond a single individual, hinting at a broader web that, if substantiated, could impact many more than previously thought. And that's where we stand now. A story that started as whispers, rumors, and subtle warning signs has exploded into a full-scale public revelation. Tiny Harris's sentencing isn't just a headline, it's a seismic event, one that could alter everything about how fans, insiders, and the public view the Harris family legacy. The debate exploded across social media, with fans and industry insiders arguing passionately. Was Tiny's sentencing a targeted takedown, genuine justice, or part of a far more complex story than the public knew? Some fans even started mapping detailed timelines, tracking every past controversy, old interview, and resurfaced clip, looking for patterns and connections. The real turning point came when voices from inside the industry began speaking up. At first, it was subtle, a deleted tweet here, a mysterious Instagram story there. Then it escalated. One artist posted bluntly, "Y'all only shocked because you didn't want to see what was right in front of you." An insider account added, "This goes way deeper than what's public. Trust me on that." Suddenly, the conversation shifted from reacting to the sentence to questioning the entire foundation of the couple's image. If even a fraction of the allegations were true, this was no longer just a private scandal. It could expose cracks in relationships, businesses, and reputations that had been built over decades. Mainstream media coverage arrived, but inconsistently. Some outlets framed the story as a dramatic fall from grace. Others hinted at ongoing investigations. A few major publications stayed silent, which only fueled speculation. People asked, why are key details being withheld? Who benefits from controlling the narrative? The public dug deeper. Old footage from reality shows, interviews, and family appearances was re-examined. Moments once seen as loving or protective now appeared tense or guarded. Supporters defended the couple, pointing to their history of overcoming adversity, while critics compiled inconsistencies, demanding accountability. Through it all, the central mystery remained. What actually led to this sentencing, and how deep did it run? For a couple whose brand was built on resilience, family unity, and overcoming odds, this chapter represented a profound fracture. Their empire, once seemingly bulletproof, now appeared vulnerable. T.I. remained mostly silent, only adding a cryptic post. Truth always comes out, but not always the way people think. 12 words that instantly went viral. Was he signaling Tiny's innocence, hinting at more hidden truths, or simply buying time? Analysts, fans, and body language experts dissected every nuance. His response became as significant as the case itself. Then came a shocking twist. A former associate, previously silent, released a video directly into the camera. Y'all don't even know half of it, and when the rest comes out, it's over for more than just Tiny. The clip racked up millions of views in hours. Suddenly, attention shifted from what had happened to what might still come. The story wasn't over, it was escalating. That same night, a new leak appeared, a raw audio file allegedly recorded months before the case went public. Tense, careful, and deliberate, the conversation hinted that Tiny might not have acted alone. Connecting these clues to prior leaks, the narrative shifted again. Questions arose. Who else was involved? How far did this reach? Panic spread. Names previously unknown reportedly surfaced behind closed doors. Posts were deleted. Collaborations vanished. Even vocal celebrities went silent. And then came a second leak, a detailed document linking multiple incidents and timelines. Its authenticity couldn't be verified immediately, but the specificity alone forced people to reconsider. Tiny's sentencing now seemed like the first domino in a much larger chain. Then came the pressure. Media outlets started circling. Fans demanded answers. T.I. stepped in, defensive and vocal, standing firmly beside Tiny. He dismissed everything as attacks and lies. For a moment, it worked. The narrative shifted back in their favor. But while the public calmed down, the investigation only accelerated. The turning point came with a leak, not just a rumor, but something concrete that couldn't be ignored. Documents, audio fragments, and a timeline that didn't match the public story at all. The moment it hit the right hands, everything moved fast. Legal teams got involved. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly started talking. One voice in particular came from someone who used to be very close to Tiny, a former insider with access to private conversations and private truths. When this person stepped forward, they didn't just hint. They dropped chilling details. Leaked transcripts described situations that painted a completely different picture. Not glamorous, not controlled, but chaotic, secretive, and deeply troubling. Social media went into meltdown. Receipts started circulating, screenshots, conversations, dates, and names that made it all feel too real. That's when authorities reportedly stepped in. What had been building quietly for months suddenly became impossible to hide. According to sources, Tiny panicked. Behind closed doors, there were frantic calls and emergency meetings as she tried to figure out just how bad things really were. Meanwhile, T.I. doubled down. He stood beside her louder than ever, calling it a setup and accusing unnamed forces of trying to destroy their legacy. But not everyone believed him this time. Old clips resurfaced. Interviews that once seemed normal now carried a completely different tone. Piece by piece, a new narrative started forming, one that didn't match the image they had spent years building. And then came the day everything changed. The day Tiny was called in. No cameras, no announcements, just a quiet, controlled move that insiders say made her realize this was real. Not rumors, not drama, but something that could actually end everything. She was visibly shaken as she sat in that courtroom. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, thick and heavy like the silence before a storm finally breaks. Just when it seemed like the entire situation revolved around one single allegation, one isolated incident that had somehow spiraled out of control, something else surfaced, something far bigger. Something that suggested this wasn't a one-off mistake at all, but part of a much deeper, more troubling pattern that had been hidden for years. In the midst of that growing online chaos, authorities made their next move. The investigation was no longer quiet or behind closed doors. It went public, and the pace accelerated dramatically, faster than anyone could control or contain. Tiny was officially drawn into a formal legal process that insiders described as already heavy with accumulated evidence. There were closed-door sessions, witness testimonies, and legal arguments that, according to leaks, proved far more intense and revealing than the public had anticipated. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere reportedly became almost unbearable. One person close to the proceedings claimed there was a palpable shift in energy at one point, a moment where you could feel the tide turning, and it became clear this was not going to end favorably. As more details emerged during these sessions, additional names surfaced. More connections were hinted at. Suddenly, the focus expanded beyond Tiny alone. It started looking like a broader network, a situation that, if the allegations held up, could implicate far more people than just one individual in their orbit. That realization delivered the biggest shock yet. One of the most viral leaks right after a key session pointed to evidence that allegedly tied together several past incidents. These were moments that had never been publicly linked before, old stories people had forgotten or dismissed as mere gossip, resurfaced clips that once seemed harmless, and coincidences that no longer felt coincidental at all. When that pattern became visible to the wider audience, the tone of the conversation changed overnight. This was no longer simple celebrity gossip or tabloid fodder. It felt genuinely serious, with potential consequences that reached well beyond one courtroom. For the first time since the scandal broke, T.I. went noticeably quiet. No defiant social media posts, no public statements defending his wife, no fiery interviews pushing back against the narrative. That silence spoke volumes. People immediately began speculating. Why isn't he saying anything now? Does he know details the rest of us don't? Or has this grown so large that even he can't control or contain it anymore? The tension kept building, layer upon layer, until it felt almost unbearable. Then came the final, decisive moment everyone had been waiting for, the actual courtroom decision and the sentencing itself. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, it didn't just shock those inside the room. It sent ripples far beyond the courthouse walls, leaving fans, industry insiders, and casual observers asking the same haunting question. If this much has already been revealed, what else is still hidden? What hasn't come out yet? The instant the sentence was announced, the outside world erupted. Within minutes, video clips, headlines, reaction videos, and hot takes flooded every platform. Blogs raced one another to break new angles. YouTube creators went live on the spot, dissecting every detail in real time. Fans refreshed their feeds obsessively, convinced that something even bigger might drop at any second. For many, this didn't feel like closure. It felt like the opening chapter of something much darker and more far-reaching. The conversation online didn't just simmer, it boiled over. Social media timelines became battlegrounds of speculation, theory, and outrage. Users weren't just commenting. They were constructing elaborate narratives, piecing together old interviews, long-deleted posts, and reality show footage, trying to connect every dot. Each new observation added fuel to the fire, creating a web of connections that made the story feel far more pervasive than a single sentencing. Industry insiders began speaking in ways they never had before. At first, it was cryptic, hidden in tweets or private accounts. Then the messages grew bolder. Artists and executives, some of them longtime collaborators with T.I. and Tiny, started hinting at the depth of what had been going on behind closed doors. One artist's post simply read, "You think this is new? You have no idea how long this has been building." Another insider went further. "This isn't just a personal issue. This touches more people than you realize. And the worst part, most don't even know they're involved." These comments changed the way people perceived everything that had unfolded. It was no longer just about Tiny's sentencing or even T.I.'s cryptic statements. Now, the narrative extended into shadows, the hidden corners of influence, loyalty, and silence that had kept this family empire together for decades. For fans who had grown up watching their rise, it was jarring. The public image of unity, strength, and unbreakable resilience suddenly seemed fragile. Mainstream media didn't ignore the story, But they didn't all tell it the same way either, and that's where the confusion really began. Some outlets leaned straight into the drama. They highlighted the courtroom tension, the emotional breakdowns, the alleged shock inside the room, and framed it as the fall of a powerful entertainment dynasty. Headlines were bold, almost cinematic, painting a picture of an empire suddenly under pressure, a couple facing consequences they had managed to avoid for years. Other publications took a more cautious route. They didn't fully embrace the sensational framing. Instead, they hinted that what the public was seeing might only be the surface layer. These reports carefully referenced ongoing discussions, unconfirmed leaks, and insider claims of a broader investigation, without fully committing to any single version of events. And then there were the silent ones. No headlines, no analysis, no commentary. That silence stood out just as much as the coverage itself. Because in moments like this, what isn't said often feels louder than what is. People started asking uncomfortable questions. Why are some media outlets diving deep while others refuse to touch it at all? Is it caution, or is something being protected behind the scenes? As the media fractured into different narratives, the public did something even more intense. They started digging. Not just into the current situation, but into everything that came before it. 2 decades of public appearances, interviews, reality show moments, award show speeches, and behind-the-scenes clips suddenly became evidence in the court of public opinion. Nothing was safe from re-examination. A smile in an old interview was analyzed frame by frame. A pause in a conversation was treated like hidden meaning. A casual comment from years ago was suddenly context. Fans and critics weren't just watching anymore. They were investigating. Supporters of Tiny and T.I. pushed one narrative hard. This was targeted, a coordinated effort. Industry jealousy mixed with online exaggeration. They pointed to T.I.'s long history in the industry, his resilience, his public battles, and argued that this was just another attempt to destabilize a powerful family that has survived controversy before. But critics weren't convinced. They pointed to something else entirely: the consistency of the claims, the repetition of similar details across different posts, the way certain timelines seemed to align, even across unrelated accounts. To them, it didn't feel random. It felt structured, intentional, like pieces of a puzzle that had been slowly forming for years without anyone noticing. Then came the post that changed the tone of everything. T.I. broke his silence, but only slightly. A short message appeared on his social media. Truth always comes out, but not always the way people think. 12 words. No explanation, no context, no clarification. And that's exactly why it exploded online. Some read it as reassurance, a subtle way of saying there's more to the story than what's being shown. Others interpreted it differently, less as comfort, more as a warning, a signal that something is still unfolding behind closed doors. Analysts, fans, and even so-called body language experts online began dissecting the piece like it was a coded message. Every word was overanalyzed. Every possible meaning was debated, but the truth remained the same. Nothing was confirmed and everything was speculation. Then the situation escalated again. A former insider, someone who had stayed silent through the initial wave of leaks, finally spoke. But this wasn't a casual comment or a vague hint. It was a direct video message. Calm tone, steady gaze, no hesitation. And then the words, "Y'all don't even know half of it, and when the rest comes out, it's over for more than just Tiny." That moment shifted everything. Because now the conversation was no longer about what had already happened. It was about what was still coming. Within hours, the clip went viral. Reposted, analyzed, broken down into segments, slowed down, reinterpreted. People weren't just reacting anymore, they were bracing themselves. And then came the leaks that followed. An audio recording surfaced online, allegedly tied to conversations from months earlier. The voices were unclear, the context incomplete, but what stood out wasn't just what was said, it was the implication. References to coordination, to decisions made behind closed doors, to names that hadn't been publicly connected before. Suddenly, the narrative expanded. It was no longer about one person or one couple. It felt larger, more complicated, more interconnected. And that's when panic started spreading in quieter corners of the industry. Posts began disappearing. Old tweets were deleted. Public comments were erased without explanation. Collaborations that had once been proudly displayed were suddenly scrubbed from pages. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was noticeable. Then came the second wave of documents. This time, structured information appeared online, timelines, alleged connections, and sequences of events that painted a much more complex picture than anything previously discussed. Whether authentic or not didn't matter as much as the impact, because the level of detail forced even skeptics to pause. And with that, the focus shifted again. Tiny's sentencing, whatever its exact nature, was no longer being treated as an isolated moment. Online discussions began framing it as a possible starting point, a trigger, a first visible crack in something much larger. People started asking different questions now. Not just what happened, but who else is involved? How far does this go? And why is so much of it still unclear? Meanwhile, T.I.'s earlier message started taking on new meaning. Truth always comes out. But now the internet was divided on what truth even referred to. Was it protection, warning, confidence, or something more complicated, like someone preparing for more revelations to surface? Then came another anonymous message circulating from a supposed insider close to the investigation. This case isn't closed, it's expanding. That one line changed the temperature of the entire conversation. Because expanding doesn't suggest closure, it suggests movement, growth, new directions. And that idea terrified people more than the original allegation ever did. Now the internet is split into factions. One side believes this is an orchestrated narrative designed to damage reputations. Another believes this is a delayed exposure of something long hidden. And a third group, the fastest growing one, believes something even more unsettling: that the full truth hasn't even started yet. Through all of it, one thing remains consistent: uncertainty. No official clarity, no complete timeline, no confirmed full narrative. Just fragments, reactions, silence, and escalating speculation. Tiny and T.I., once seen as a stable entertainment dynasty, are now at the center of a storm that is no longer just about them. It's about perception, influence, and how quickly narratives can shift when information is incomplete. Every new leak reshapes the conversation. Every silence adds weight. Every cryptic message fuels interpretation. And as the noise grows louder, the center of the story becomes harder to see. Was this a targeted misrepresentation? A misunderstanding blown out of proportion? Or the early stages of something far more serious than anyone expected? Right now, nobody has the full answer. And until that changes, the story doesn't end. It continues to evolve. Because in situations like this, the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces, and the next piece could change everything again.